And it finishes. Great. Good morning, everybody. Oh, afternoon rather now, just. Thanks so much for attending. I hope you find it really interesting and informative. I'm Jonathan Helliwell. I'm a civil servant here in the Cabinet Office. And I'm director, so-called, over the honours system and various other bits of the Cabinet Office. Sorry, there's an announcement here in the background.
May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? The external power issues affecting the building are continuing.
Sorry about that. We're having some power issues here. We're very pleased to have 4 fantastic committee members joining us today on today's panel, who will share their experiences of sitting on the independent honours committees, and they can explain how the whole system works. For those who are unfamiliar with this, how it works, I'll just give a brief outline. There are 10 honours committees that scrutinise honours applications. There's sports, arts and media, community and voluntary service, the economy, education, health, parliamentary and political service, public service, science and technology, and the state committee. And they sift basically a whole long list of honours twice a year and decide who should be recommended for an honour and what level, MBE or CBE or whatever it might be. The committees are made up of independent members, and as I say, we've got a few of them here today. They take their roles very seriously and they're experts in their respective fields. So I hope this event encourages people to think about nominating somebody who's deserving, and please do keep pen and paper handy. Hopefully the tips they offer will be useful. And there'll be time for Q&A at the end. So I now invite the panellists to join me. And if they could each give a short introduction to themselves and the committee they sit on. And I'll ask first Barbara, and then Adiba, then Naomi, and then finally Jenny. So first of all, Barbara.
Hello, everybody. I'm Barbara Munro. I have a lifetime career in hospice and end-of-life care. I'm now retired, and I'm currently chair or vice chair of 3 large charities. And I'm chair of the Public Service Honours Committee. And I'm also a very busy granny to 5 under 9-year-olds.
Thank you, Bob. Adiba.
Thank you, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here because this is really important what the Cabinet Office is doing in terms of promoting the honours to our audiences. And I've got just nearly 30 years of experience of working in the voluntary and the community sector. My main job is as Deputy Chief Executive of a charity based in Bradford called QED Foundation. I've served as trustee of various charities over the years, and I'm now, I think, into my I've done 3 years on the Community and Voluntary Service Committee, which it's a real honour to be part of.
Thanks, Adiba. That's great. And Naomi?
Hi, I'm Naomi Clymer. I'm an engineer by profession. I've had a career in industry in the UK and abroad. These days, I'm a non-exec director on several tech company boards. I co-chair the Institute for the Future of Work, which is a charity, and I'm on the Science and Technology Awards Committee, and I also sit on the Honours Diversity Committee.
Thanks so much. Jenny?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jenny Rowe. I am on the State Committee, and I'm also the State Committee's representative on the Diversity Committee. My career was in the civil service for, I think, just over 37 years. And my last job was as Chief Executive of the UK Supreme Court. Since retiring from full-time work, I do a variety of voluntary roles, including charity trusteeships.
Thank you so much. That's great. Now I'm just going to ask the panel about their own experience of receiving an honour themselves. You've all received honours for your work outside of your committee roles, I hasten to add. And it'd be just great to start today's discussion about, what do you feel about them? What was it like to receive an honour? Why do you think honours are important? I don't know if Barbara, if you want to kick off. Others chip in.
I think, like most people who get the letter, it's kind of complete shock. You think it's an elaborate hoax or it's something to do with income tax, and then this enormous feeling of pride. I remember both my parents were dead when I got made a dame, and I just remember thinking how proud and how much they would have enjoyed it. And then the pleasure in sharing it, because of course most people who get an honour also think it's something to do with their colleagues or the organisation they work for, and often it does real good for your organisation too. So enormously proud. And I've got one very quick funny story. So I'm at the palace getting ready to receive my award, and I'm behind the scenes, and I'm going to go in first on this particular ceremony. And a very tall man in a uniform, who was leading me through the back corridors, said to me, gosh, you did well. You jumped straight to Dame without anything before it. And he made me so anxious that I could hardly get through the door.
That's great. Any other of the panelists, Jenny, or any of the others, would you like to make your own comments about the experience of getting older and the importance of the honour system in general?
Well, I'd echo what Barbara says about the shock, actually, of getting the letter. And then, of course, the inability to tell anybody for several weeks, which is really very difficult. And the fact that you do feel, I think it reflects what your team has done and what the other, the colleagues in your office. And I just think, having seen the reaction of other people to getting honour, it just shows you how effective the honour system is at actually rewarding people and making them feel that they've made a contribution. I think you can easily underestimate the impact it has.
Thank you. Adiba, Naomi, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to add to what's been said, I mean, the pleasure of being fortunate to have an MBE and then to be awarded a CBE was not just mine, but it is really for your colleagues, it's the people that you work with, it's the organisations that you support, the causes you care about and support. It's also about your friends and people in the communities. And Jonathan, just to say from a very kind of a personal level, that the reason why these two things meant so much to me, especially the C one, was because my mother was alive to see me getting both those honours. My mother was alive to be able to get the opportunity to go to Buckingham Palace on both occasions and see Prince Charles giving my award, even though in the seat when I got the CBE, after I'd been on, she decided to have a kip in her chair and fell asleep. But, there's reasons for that. But she did. But the pride that my mother had, and I'm a daughter of immigrants. So my dad came in 57, my mum came in 66, and he was a textile worker, she was a housewife. And then for them to see, of my mother to see, that her daughter has actually been given one, an incredible honour. It just shows that you can start from wherever you start, but it's all about the journey that you make. And it's not necessarily about who you know, what you know, and your background. It's about your efforts and the impact of your work. And that can apply to anybody, regardless of their background. And that, to me, was really the important message about me, in particular, getting my C.
Thanks, Adina.
Yeah, and I don't have much to add to that. I really identify with all of those stories, the shock of getting that letter and being absolutely convinced that it was some sort of administrative mistake. And not really believing it could possibly be true. But it meant so much to me. I too took my mum to the palace, and that meant a lot to me. But I wholeheartedly agree that it means so much to the organisations that you work with and the individuals around you, friends and colleagues and family. And so, kind of imperfect or not as a system, it's really worth recognising people. It just means so much, and it's I found the whole thing inspiring, and and it motivates me to be better. So it was so worth it.
Great, thanks so much. That's all really helpful. I'd just now like to open up slightly more the conversation and particularly ask you in turn about your own committees that you serve on. So, Barbara, I'll come to you first. Can you tell us about your role as the chair of the Public Services Committee? What does that entail? Why did you want to chair it?
Yeah, so Public Service Committee, we cover things like fire, police, rescue, the broad area of justice, public sector roles, local government officials, elected officials, foster carers, social care, social housing, a whole broad range of things. And my job as chair is to help the committee come to decisions about who is going to get an award, at what level, sometimes when, is it now or should it be a bit later when there's more evidence? And to chair the discussions. And I often think to myself when we're in the middle of a committee meeting, that if people could see it, they would be surprised at the robustness of the argument. People have very strong views on the committee, and it's by batting it backwards and forwards that we think, is this somebody who's just doing their job really, really well? Or is this someone who's gone above and beyond and done something quite exceptional? And those are difficult decisions to make.
Absolutely. And can I ask you why you wanted to chair the committee?
Partly because I knew what it meant to me and to the palliative care, hospice, end-of-life care sector when I got made a dame. But also, when we were trying to do difficult things, and sometimes I worked quite a lot overseas, trying to establish hospice care programs in resource poor countries. And when things were difficult, I used to say leadership was about having eyes that see and saying thank you. And I really believe that's true of society as a whole. We need to have eyes that see the endeavour and the creativity, and we need to say thank you. So for me, that was what was represented by the honours system, and it's why I'm proud to be part of it.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Adiba, go to you next. Tell us about the Community and Voluntary Services Honours Committee. What does it do?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Jonathan, when I saw the job being advertised, and I really wanted to apply, I wanted to apply mainly because, for two reasons. One, because the contribution that people in this country are making in terms of community and voluntary service is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And the diversity of the contribution is phenomenal. It's not just about evident the kind of picture in terms of the voluntary service that most people have. You know, if you look under that and you look under the radar and the contributions people are making at very local levels, for example, it's just amazing. It's mind-boggling. You know, it's such a strong contribution to our economy, to our country, and wanted to be part of a setup which was going to recognize people at those kind of levels, at grassroots levels, at levels where, you know, people don't really know anything about, but they're quietly beavering away in the background in their communities. And I thought, well, you know what, I've had this opportunity and I want to be part of a group of people who are going to recognize these people and see the validity and the contribution that they're making. And so to me, being on the committee is an honor for me personally, because I feel I'm giving other people that opportunity to be recognized, that, you know, deserve to be recognized and deserve to be brought out into the limelight and say, well, actually, you know, thank you so much for what you've done. So there's something so rewarding about that. Again, as I said, seeing the diversity of the contributions and the type of things people do above and beyond, and that is really important. Above and beyond is really humbling.
And Adiba, what kind of people do you look at in the CVS committee? What types of backgrounds? All kinds. You know, people who are running organisations, people who are, you know, from the knighthoods down to the BEMs. You know, there's somebody I know in Bradford who runs a very successful sports setup, and his nomination came to my committee, and
I knew the good work he'd done, and he was given a BM. He was so happy with that. So it's that diversity of people running organisations, down to people really doing voluntary work where it's completely unpaid, unknown of. But the common theme, Jonathan, is that they've gone above and beyond, but they've also had impact in what they've done. They've brought about change. And that's what I'm always interested in. What has happened as a result of you doing what you're doing?
Great, thank you so much. Jenny, can I turn to you now? Tell us about the State Honours Committee, what type of nominations you get.
Yeah, well, the State Honours Committee deals with civil servants, and from all around Great Britain and Northern Ireland. So we get nominations for all levels, from knighthoods to BEMs, as with other committees. We get a huge number and variety of nominations for each round. And as a committee member, there is a great deal of reading in a relatively short period of time as well. And we do get many more nominations than we have awards that we can recommend. And that makes it really quite difficult at times to make decisions. And just picking up on Barbara's point, I mean, our committee does have very robust discussions about individuals. And I think particularly the timing issues can be important for some, because, is there enough information at a particular stage to recommend them? You can see that someone is actually getting there, but perhaps, not yet. So I think that's what I'm saying.
Great, that's really helpful, thank you. Naomi, tell us about the Science and Technology Committee, and what do you look for in a nomination, and what do you enjoy most about sitting on the committee?
Yeah, so science and technology is quite broad, and so the kinds of nominations that come in, it'll be everything from someone trying to cure cancer to somebody cleaning up the ocean or trying to build safer houses. It might be an anthropologist who's advancing our understanding of society and culture, or an economist advancing public understanding of a fiscal policy or something. So it's kind of a huge range, and it's very difficult. How do you kind of weigh those against each other? So, as others have said, there's a very robust discussion, and it's kind of days of reading material. I take it very, very seriously, and it's clear to me that the other people on the committee do too. In fact, if I'm honest, when I was encouraged to apply to be on the committee, I went in feeling slightly combative about it and expecting it not to be as rigorous, and somehow felt like I was going to go in and kind of fight for the underdog. And actually, the committee just, I was really impressed by how everybody clearly has read every nomination. Everybody is ready to kind of openly discuss views, change their mind as things come out. And so I'm really impressed with the rigor of the people who are, basically giving their time for free. And so for science and tech, it's very broad. That makes it challenging, but it makes it inspiring and interesting. And as Adiba said, understanding what the impact was and why that matters, why it matters that they did what they did, and what sort of obstacles people had to climb over in order to achieve what they did, is all very important. But to be honest, it's inspiring and uplifting to do.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. That's really helpful. Now I'm just going to ask the panel to think about how, because I know this is of interest to some of the people listening, what a good application looks like, what a good nomination looks like. And also, I wondered if it would be helpful if maybe, Barbara, you could also just start off by saying who can be, in terms of the process of how do you get on the committee? How does it work? Who can be a committee member? I wonder if, Barbara, if you'd like to start talking about that, and then the rest of the panel about what does good look like for a nomination?
Yeah. Anybody can be a independent committee member, but they need to have expertise in at least one of the areas that the committee covers. And I guess just reflecting on what everybody's been saying about the discussions, people do need some experience in having tried to assess things, because there are hundreds of applications, and at the end of the day, we have to make choices. It's voluntary, it's unpaid, and the term is for 3 years.
Great, thanks, Barbara. So, opening up to the rest of the panel, tell us about nominations. What does one look like that's really good? Any examples that you can think of to have an impact on you? What makes a strong nomination? What makes it stand out?
Can I just say something here? Because I think it's really important that a nomination explains what impact the individual has had.
Yeah.
Because it's not sufficient to say they're a jolly good person and they've worked very hard. It's got to be something much more specific. And it's very, I think Naomi might have said, it's very helpful to know as much as you can about the challenges people might have faced along the way and how they've dealt with them. But it's very much about what has changed as a result of what this person has done and how significant is that. And I think you've really got to think about that. And if anyone's writing a nomination, do bear in mind there is a word count. So you need to use that carefully. But make sure there is enough information to enable a committee to come up with a recommendation, because we get so many more nominations than we can actually recommend. So you're looking for something which stands out.
Thank you. Anybody else? Adeba?
Yeah, John, can I just add to that? That for me, I'm looking at the impact of what they've done. So I'm not looking for, well, I did this year. This year I did this. I had this role. No, it's what did you do with the role, within that role? What is it that changed? What difference did you bring about? And that could be in terms of facts, figures, examples of policy change or whatever. But it's really getting behind the roles and understanding the change that's been brought about as a result of you doing what you're doing. And also, for me personally, I also like to look at the progression. What, in terms of the development of that person, started off as this, and then I moved on to them. This is the impact. Then I did, having that story in terms of the development of that person, I always find that interesting. The other thing I do tend to do, especially with the higher honours, I tend to do my own research about each of the person that's put in front of me. I don't rely on just the fantastic work that the Secretariat do in preparing it, because I feel when you are looking at the knighthoods, the Cs, and even the O's, I'd like to do a bit of research myself on each of those people. And quite often I will find things that are, genuine in terms of the articles or papers they've written or whatever, that will help me in terms of my assessment of that person and the development of that individual in their career, and in the impact is really, really important. Waffling doesn't do anything for me personally. It's about being to the point and very clear about what the impact is.
Yeah, I mean, I'd back that up. I really agree with what Adeba just said. And she said the word story. And for me, telling the story is important, because sometimes a nomination does read like a CV, where it is just a kind of list of jobs and, and even awards won and things, but it doesn't tell the story. And I do need to understand that. And as well as understanding not just what the impact was, but why it actually matters, especially in science and tech. Sometimes you can hear the impact and it sounds really impressive, but it's still not clear what that actually does for the world. But also, the bond bit is so important, because it's really clear that we're not giving awards to people for doing their job, the job that they're paid for. And so it's really important to understand why what they did is more than what you would expect of someone in that role. And so for me, not just the above and the beyond in the job, but actually if they were doing related voluntary things on the edges that of themselves don't seem like particularly grand gestures, but the package of all of that extra stuff that somebody is doing around their role to make an impact, that does really help to tell this overall story.
Thank you. Barbara?
And I guess what we've all been saying, but just to emphasize the point, is that there is no typical recipient. I think sometimes people don't put people forward because they've got a bit of an idea of the kind of person who gets an award. There isn't a kind of person. There is outstanding achievement in all sorts of organisations, communities, different kinds of community groups. it's that matters. There isn't a typical recipient.
Great, that's very helpful.
Can I just add, Jonathan, sorry, just quickly, because I just had a comment that it's like any email or letter or anything that you get or read, that first sentence captures that nomination. And I think that first sentence or that first paragraph is really important, is to get that bit right, so that, you know, I think it's a very important message to give out at the beginning.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that the committees do have like an enormous number of applications in front of them, so that actually anything that makes it stand out is really helpful. I was just going to ask the panel to say, are there any types of nominations you'd like to see more of that you think in your specific areas are missing and that you'd like to see a bit more of?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll just start being, I mean, you know, the State Committee is looking at people around the country, and we do not have enough nominations from the North of England and the Midlands, for example, and we're always pressing for more diverse nominations, so from minority ethnic communities, from the disabled, from other minority communities, and I really emphasise the importance of actually people putting forward, people thinking about this and putting individuals forward. It's really, really important. And I mean, also, there can be a preponderance of nomination from people who work in policy roles on the State Committee, and we would like more people who are actually in front-facing operational roles, because that's hugely important. People there are seen and valued.
Thanks. Anybody else? Barbara?
I think we would like to see more women at the higher award level, and also more people from minority ethnic groups at the higher award level. And we're also, and the geographic diversity that Jenny's already alluded to. We'd also like to see some younger people, because of the nature of the organisations that our committee looks at. We tend to get older people, and we're very aware that younger people in these kinds of organisations are also doing amazing things, so we'd be keen to have more of those.
Absolutely. And there are, as you know, there are one or two in the recent honours list who are quite young.
Yeah.
Right. Adiba.
Yeah. So the regional diversity is important, because we know from the statistics, and what's important for the audience to know is that we are collecting statistics all the time, right across the committees. So the judgments that we're making are not just, you know, pulled out of the air, and we need to do it. It's based on evidence, and the percentages in terms of regional diversity, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of disability, in terms of sexual orientation, and socioeconomic background is an important one as well. So that is something that really interests me too, because for me as a member, it's showing that the honour system is open to all and not to a particular type of person from a particular economic or social background. So we're monitoring the statistics, but we need more representation. And I agree with you, Barbara, more women at the higher level, and ethnic minorities at the higher level, but more so from the northeast, the northwest, and Yorkshire and the Midlands, please.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's the same story for science and technology. Certainly people from ethnic minorities, women, the regional diversity, in our case, Northwest Yorkshire and Humber and the West Midlands. I also, from a science tech point of view, would like to see more sort of small companies, more entrepreneurs, and you know, my personal prejudice, obviously more mainstream industry as well as academia, and I can imagine that for small companies, doing nominations for honours is probably the last thing on their mind, but it's so worth it. So it would be really nice just to see some organisations that maybe don't consider themselves. It's what Barbara said earlier, that there isn't a typical recipient actually. You know, only because they haven't been nominated, let's get some nominations in from some areas of science and tech that maybe haven't been represented before.
Great.
Can I just quickly add another one? I know I keep putting my hand up, but it's a thought following on from what Naomi's just said. I think it'd be good to see kind of more nominations coming through from business people who do a lot of voluntary and community work in their areas, and that is going above and beyond. So they're not just employers or running a business, but they are actually doing a lot in their communities in terms of supporting charitable causes and voluntary organisations, which, as I know from the voluntary sector, we do rely a lot on that from the business community. So maybe there's something we need to look at on that one as well.
Thank you. We've got about 5 minutes left before we go to the Q&A. Just if I ask maybe 1 or 2 more questions for the panel, if that's okay. How do you choose who is and who isn't recommended for an honour? I mean, I know you've addressed what good looks like already, but what does not like good look like as well? How do you choose?
Somebody who's clearly done a good job, but that's what they've done. And I do think that a few years ago there was quite a big public perception that you got an honour as a kind of present for certain roles. We work very hard to avoid that. And we're also not that keen on things that come just as somebody's retiring, like it's a sort of leaving present. I would say those are the things that come immediately to my mind.
Thank you. Anybody else?
We do get a list of strategic priorities from the PM for each round, and I do pay attention to that. And there are some things that are, for the time I've been doing it, have been consistent from one PM to another, which is things like we don't give awards for just doing your job. But they do subtly change, and so it may be, empowering women is kind of on the list, or it may be, creating jobs is on the list. So I pay attention to that, and because we always have more good nominations than we have awards to give, that's one of the things that I would use to help decide who should get an award and who not.
Can I just pick up on what both those points really? What Barbara was saying about not getting an honour just for, when you retire, and I think it's important that certainly in terms of the State Committee, that departments don't just nominate people when they're about to retire. If there's someone who is worthy of a nomination, then you need to really get in before that for them to stand a chance of getting it. And the point about strategic priorities, I think, is really important, and that does guide our discussions. And just as an example, and it won't come as a surprise to anybody, but for the last couple of rounds, for example, people who contributed a great deal to the COVID response have been a priority, which you would expect.
Thank you. That's great. In the couple of minutes left before we go to Q&A, any more top tips? You've already given plenty of top tips about putting together a nomination, or indeed any other points the panel would like to make more generally about being on a committee. Adiba.
Yeah, Jonathan, I think it's a general statement I want to make for the audience, is that, maybe a few years ago, we didn't see the kind of openness around the honour system as we are seeing now. I think that has moved on from what maybe have been 5-6 years ago. The fact that we're doing events like this, the fact that we're being very open, and we've got committee members saying what they're looking for, giving the tips, giving ideas. We're seeing that change taking place, and that's because we want to attract good nominations. We want to make sure that the people in our society who have gone above and beyond and have had impact are recognised. And civil servants sat on their own in London can't do that alone. We need to open up, and this is what we're doing. And one of the things I will get is, well, is it still a closed door, and are decisions made in with kind of discussions in the corridors about this and that? Well, we go through a process, and we go through a process where we do, as committee members, we'll have very kind of, at times, intense discussions about who should and who shouldn't. But that's because that's what we're all there for. Then the chair's job is to make sure that, we come to some agreement that everybody's happy with.
And I'd just say, if you're thinking about nominating someone, really have a go. If you think and other people agree with you, have a go, because somebody can only get an award if they're nominated.
Yeah. Exactly. Great. Any other points anybody would like to make about being on a committee? And we discussed diversity a little bit, it kind of came up naturally in the conversation, but anything, we specifically raised the issue around regional diversity, which is definitely an issue in terms of we need more nominations from the North East and various other bits of the country, including the Midlands. But just to kind of close this section, how seriously do committee members take diversity and is diversity a consideration when deciding whether somebody doesn't receive an honour?
Incredibly seriously, because I think we all recognise that if this is going to be a national honours system and it's going to have legitimacy, everybody needs to feel represented or to feel the possibility of representation. And all of the committees, and when we're at main board as well, it's completely obvious that diversity, and as Adiba said, it's tracked, it matters.
Great, that's really
helpful.
Yeah,
from my point of view, I do think diversity is taken incredibly seriously. And again, from my own working life, I've had the experience of always been the one that raised diversity and feeling like if I didn't say something about it in every meeting, it didn't get said. And that's not my experience in the honours committee. It's delightful the extent to which we challenge each other about unconscious bias, and we talk about diversity throughout the meeting, not just as a wrap up at the end. And sitting on the diversity committee, which effectively just has a representative from each committee, and we all talk about how it's handled on different committees. And the challenges are different depending on the sector it's looking at. It's clear that it is something that people feel really strongly about, and not just the people that sit on the diversity committee, but every single member. So it's been really refreshing, to be honest, but we still could do better, especially at the senior levels.
Thank you. So just moving on to the questions, which I see people have sent in, which is great. One of them is there a quota of honours for each committee and at a particular level? Who would like to answer that? Anybody?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, each committee has a certain number of recommendations they can make at every level. And so, as I think I've already said, we have many more nominations than we can make recommendations, and that leads to some very tricky discussions about who should go forward on any particular round. Because if you've only got 5 slots or 10 slots or whatever, some people can be very, very close. It's very difficult sometimes.
And for some of the higher awards, there is something called a pool, and that's really useful for nominations where the individual doesn't fit neatly into the slot of one committee. They've got contributions across lots of sectors. So when we're at the final wrap-up committee, the main honours board, we do have the opportunity with just a small number to put people forward who have that kind of cross-cutting contribution.
Thanks, that's great. Just looking at some of the other questions, somebody has asked, Jenny has asked, appreciate every nomination is unique. What would constitute a strong first sentence? Anybody like to try and answer that?
This foster carer has transformed the lives of 26 children over the last 30 years and is still in touch with all of them as adults.
Great. Anything anybody else would like to add? That's pretty good.
That sums up. That's such a powerful. That's the kind of thing I'd be looking for, Barbara, in terms of the number of years, the impact, the numbers, whatever. And I think that in one sentence, it captures your thoughts about that person, and it's powerful. It's powerful.
Just looking at some of the other questions. Somebody has asked, does politics enter into it? And second question, really, if people have been bankrupt in their past, does this affect the outcome? So would somebody like to answer does the politics enter into it? And then somebody else answer the, about kind of probity, basically, issues.
I mean, I assume the question is asking about does party politics come into
Exactly.
it?
Yeah.
And certainly not. It's irrelevant in terms of certainly the committee on which I sit, and I think other committees, although there is a committee that deals with political honours, isn't there? And that is, I think, that's different. But certainly not. I mean, as has already mentioned, we do have a set of strategic priorities from the Prime Minister, but that's not party political.
Thank you. And the question which is essentially about probity, if you've been bankrupt in your past, does this affect your nomination? Who would like to answer that?
We do run probity checks, and they're taken very seriously. But I think if something is well in the past, everybody is allowed a second chance at life, and some people in their second chance in life do amazing things. So we don't have a set of, if you've ever done that as a teenager or a young person, or something like, you can't, because that would be wrong. We all make mistakes, and sometimes your second go is truly remarkable.
Yeah. Thank you. That's really helpful. Somebody has asked about a question: if some of the supporters for a nomination aren't around anymore, how do you evidence a story? And essentially saying, if it's a secret, if the person who's being nominated doesn't know about it, how do you evidence the story without the cooperation of the nominee? And effectively, how do you kind of back up the story of for the nomination?
That's an interesting question, but in reality, these kinds of honours are for things that people will have noticed, and so it's hard to imagine a situation where there's literally no one available who's able to back up a nomination. And so, but it's true. I mean, certainly nobody discussed my nomination with me. I was unaware it had gone in, and I think that's kind of nice. But there were plenty of people to ask. So I think it isn't always that easy. I mean, when I look at science and tech nominations, it's helpful if a professional body or or a university or somebody has kind of backed it up. But I think there are other ways that you can evidence impact. I mean, I guess you'd have to tell me a specific of a case where there literally is no one remaining who could evidence it. But for the kind of honours we're giving, it's a significant enough impact that I would imagine there's always someone that can evidence it.
And we're not looking to give honours to people who've stopped doing what they're doing, by and large. So these are going to be individuals, even if they're older individuals, they're going to be individuals who are still at it. So it ought to be possible to delve in and find someone who can bring evidence.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the other questions. We've got a couple of minutes left. Chris asked, are successful citations published? Which the answer is no. And then there's somebody earlier on, and I think to some degree we have discussed this already, about saying a lot of people think it's wrong for paid people to receive honours and it's about voluntary work. Well, obviously the CVS committee, which Adima is on, does look at voluntary work, and actually it's a very large proportion of the overall amount of honours published are from that committee. In fact, the committees are not equal in size. I don't know if
That's right.
one of your, Barbara or Diva, or somebody wants to discuss that.
I think certainly on the Public Service Committee, quite a number of the people who get honours from public service aren't paid. A lot of the people involved in rescue services, the Girl Guides, the Boy Scouts, the brigades, there's and people involved in social care on a voluntary basis. So yeah, I think there's a good mix.
And actually on science and tech, there's usually, it's unusual for somebody to not have some voluntary component to their nomination. It's part of somebody who's going above and beyond, that they will almost always have some element of that. But I would certainly argue there are cases where somebody's done something, they've done it because the right thing, they've battled their organisation to get it done, it's made a difference in the world. And yes, they may have had a salary at the same time. And I think that, you know, that's something we judge when deciding if they were just doing what they were paid to do or they really pushed the boundaries.
The same as civil service.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think you've just encapsulated it absolutely right. I mean, we look at what other things people have done outside their paid employment.
Great. I think we're pretty near the end now. In fact, we are at 1 o'clock and we said we'd finish at 1. Thanks so much for the panelists for giving up your time, for joining and sharing your experience and expertise. It's been really, really helpful. I hope the audience found this helpful. Please do look at our website, which has a newly updated in technological terms form for nominations on there, honours.cabinetoffice.gov.uk. There are a lot more honours events happening today and tomorrow, which you can look at the official Eventbrite page. And there's a panel for those in health and social care happening straight after this one, I believe, which is being chaired by Andrew Goodall, who's a permanent secretary for the Welsh Government. So that's from 1 till 2. Thank you very much indeed. I think this has shown exactly how much expertise the independent committees have and the level of attention to detail that the panel members all bring voluntarily to this role. We're tremendously grateful to all of them for giving out their time, not just for this session, but in general for these quite rigorous sessions we have twice a year. Thank you very much for attending and hope you enjoy the rest of the festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.